Go and have a seat. Why don't you bow your heads with us this morning, and we're going to go to the Lord's Prayer. Before I even started pastoring, I'd just been called to preach. A guy gave me a little booklet. I don't know. It's about the quarter size of a regular book, about 10 pages, and it's called Tyranny of the Urgent. And basically the message is this, that in life most of the time the urgent things always overtake the important things. So we find ourselves just constantly meeting demands because they're urgent, and that causes us to neglect what are really the things that are important. Rob and I were talking about that this morning, about every day it seems like one thing after another, and you're needed, or you have to know something, or you have to have some information, and somebody needs you, and you're pulled in all these different directions. And it's all by design. You know, God's not the only one that has a plan for your life. The devil has a plan to wreck it. And I'll tell you, if I've never seen it more clearly in my life, if he can't make you bad, he'll make you busy. He will cause you, if you aren't rebelling against doing the right thing, he will keep you so busy that you won't have time, you think you won't have time to do the right thing. But I'm telling you right now that song, Take Time to Be Holy, used to seem so odd to me. It's like, well, it doesn't really make sense to me. Until I started having kids and a family, and I realized how quickly time gets away and how valuable it really is. I think the hardest thing in the world for me is to be alone and quiet, just listening to the Lord. Not speaking, not going in with any intention, but simply to just be still and know. But I think it's important. I think it makes a difference. I think it makes a difference in my day. It makes a difference in my life when I do it. And so, I really don't have any great advice for a lot of people, other than I feel like more than anything these days, we need to slow down. We just need to slow down a little bit and start seeking God's face again. I feel like somewhere along the way we started seeking His hand, and not us specifically, but the church. And I feel like the only way to change that is not a bunch of doing, and it's not a bunch of changing, which is what everybody in my generation wants to do in the Nazarene church. Change everything. I think we just need to take time. Take time to be holy and spend it with the Lord, and that's what we're here to do. Father, we gather here today for one reason alone, and that is to worship you. Father, I pray that even just for these next moments, God, that you would remove the stress or the anxiety and the worry and the cares, Lord, that we have and that we have to go back to once we leave here. Would you allow, even just for this moment, Lord, would you allow those things not to be a distraction to what you would want to say to us today? God, I know so many times in my own life I miss what you're trying to tell me or what you would have me to do, simply because I'm too busy and I don't stop and just take time to listen and to be still and to trust and to know that you're God. But Father, I pray that we would learn to do that. I pray that we would not just spend more time reading our Bible or so we can say we prayed longer or anything like that, but just that we can have more time with you and that it might change us. Father, there are so many needs, and I'm learning more and more every day that there are so many more needs than we can ever possibly have the resources to meet. But at the core of every single one of them, there is a person in need, and their greatest need is to know that you love them and that Jesus died for them. And that's our mission, is simply to go and tell people that, to love people in such a way where they'll believe that. And it sounds like such a simple task. But the devil has a way of just making things seem so chaotic at times. And he can take good things and make them bad things just by making you busy or making you put those things above the Lord and above our time with you. So, Father, I pray that we would just get our priorities straight. That we would not waver, Lord, that we would stick to it, and that we would spend the time we need to with you, and that we would spend the time we need to with our families, and that we would spend time reaching out to the people in this community that need to know about you. There's no big secret as to what's wrong with this country and with this world, and it's sin. It always has been, and it always will be. It's like Solomon said, there's nothing new under the sun. It's the same old tricks the devil's always pulled. Father, there's only one answer to sin, and that is Jesus Christ. So, Father, I pray that today that we would just put our focus and our trust on you. That everything that we do would be for him. Lord, that we would know that even the reason we're able to do it is because of him, and that one of these days we're going to be with you. Father, until then, you've given us your Holy Spirit to guide us, to give us strength for the journey. So God, I pray, Lord, for that soul here today that's just weak, or feels far from you, or it's been a while since they've heard from you, they feel like. Lord, maybe they've been praying for something for a long time, and they still haven't got the answer that they want or that they need. Father, this morning, I don't know the situation or the circumstance in every case, but I pray for every single individual here today that you would remind them that wherever they are, that you will be there with them. That they're safe not because you're going to take them out of the situation, but they're safe because you're going to be there with them during it. So, Father, as we walk through struggles in life, or if we're going through times of plenty or times of want, Lord, I pray that no matter what, that we would trust in you in the times of need, and that we would thank you and be grateful for the times that we have plenty. Father, we're here to worship you today because whether we have a lot or we have none, we have Jesus Christ, and that is worth everything. So, Father, we thank you. Bless this time of worship in Jesus' name.
Right, our next hymn is called Pentecostal Power. It can be found on page 290 in your hymn book.
What's the
I've
other?
heard it.
Okay, our next hymn is Glorious Freedom.
Receive the
so much for not just what you do for us, but what you give to us, Father. We're so undeserving. I pray now, Lord, that this offering would just be used to honor you and glorify you in every way in Christ.
I come with joy to meet my Lord, forgiven, loved, and free. In power and wonder to recall His life laid down for me. Christians far and near, to find as all are glad, thy new community of love, Christ communion bread. As Christ breaks bread and bids us share each proud division ends, the love that made us makes us one, and strangers now for friends. And thus with joy to meet the Lord, His presence always near, is in such friendship evermore. We sing and praise Him together met, together found, we'll go our different ways, and that is people in the world will live and speak His praise.
Yeah.
Remind me of that. Oh man, that's a beautiful song. Gene, it's so glad to have you guys with us today. And y'all were here, it's been about a month ago, and I didn't know you guys were coming today, but I'm thankful you are here and that we're able to worship together. I'm not kidding you, and I could say this every week, I guess, but this was one of those weeks that there were so many demanding things, not just job-wise, but job, family, wife's job, like the trifecta, everything that could possibly be a stressor or could be like an added burden kind of, it came at us. One thing after another, and sometimes more than one at a time, and it all culminated, I guess, last night at Eli's birthday party, and in a good way. It was like, okay, finally, the work week is coming to a close, and Laura had three different babies in 2 days that were what they would call failure to thrive, which means they're not gaining weight, which means there's a possibility he just has to get involved, and it's hard. You're dealing with a mom, so you've got that, and then you've got kids who you give them everything in the world, and you give them a snow cone stand for their birthday, all this other stuff, and then they start expecting things like peanut butter and jelly sandwiches at 11 o'clock at night. They would prefer to eat them in bed if you could, and the milk is just about a degree too cold. So if you could just let that warm up. But the little bitty things that aren't really that big of a deal start becoming a really big deal. Mainly, I was talking about this with Arthur this morning, but usually that's because I lose my temper. Something that could have been small, even a disagreement or a difference in opinion, is now when Dad lost it. You know? And it's like, the devil does that to you. Because if we kind of focused on what God wanted for us, it's not really this simple all the time, but He is constantly not only getting us through, but He is preparing us for what's to come, and He's also making us stronger in the process. And you know, when He finally freed the Israelites, they were slaves in Egypt, and He said, I'm going to get you out, you're my people, you do not need to be in bondage, I'm going to save you, I'm going to redeem you, and I'm going to rescue you. And so He did. And then they get into the wilderness, and they start trying to do it their own way, because they got what they needed from God. And man, I could just see this in my own life playing out. I don't know if it was the same way for you as a Christian, but I became a Christian right before I got married. And I could see that. In the beginning, I had no choice but to trust in God, and I was thankful, and I remembered what He had done for me and where I was when He found me. And it was exciting, and it was new, and it was just completely and totally trusting on Him. And then, I don't know, 2, 3, 5 years into it, now 11, but you start to figure out how things work, and start to figure out things to where you can manufacture some of it on your own. And you can start doing things, and you can live a pretty religious life, and most of the time, at least put on a good face for the community and for the church, and do all the right things. And you'll still be wandering around in the wilderness, wondering why on earth you feel the way you do, and you can't. I remember I couldn't ever reason with why I had such a beautiful family, and an incredible job, and a wonderful church and community, and I felt like I didn't have any meaning in my life. And I just couldn't, for a long time I didn't know, and I just started really growing distant in my spiritual life. My relationships in my family got stronger because I started to come to them more. And it all boiled down to this. Art Noel said it, I forgot where I was when God found me. And I forgot that there's nothing that I could ever possibly learn that would qualify me to lead this place and to do what needs to be done. God, not only do I need Him to do it, He has to do it. There's just no way. I've reached that point long ago now that if God doesn't have control of this thing, we're all in a big, big mess. But I can tell you this much. We are, 2018. In 2021, so 3 years, this church will celebrate 100 years of ministry in this community. 100 years. And I want you to think about this. There is no other organization or no other place that I know of in America, or in the world really, that gives you a place to belong from the time you're born until the time you die, except the local church. And if it's done right, that church will keep kind of reproducing, and it'll keep having more people. And these aren't the same families that were here 100 years ago. And so that sort of ministry takes place whenever God gets past that wilderness and He brings you to a place of abundant life, is what Jesus called it. But Canaan is how it's described in the Old Testament. It's a place, but it's an illustration for where we want to be spiritually. God may have freed you from bondage. He may have freed the church from bondage for something, or established a church. And He may do that for a family, and He'll do that for individuals. And then there's a lot of us, and I don't know if this is true of churches, but a lot of families and a lot of individuals will get saved, and then they will not ever get any closer to the Lord because they think they've got saved, and that's all they needed. Every year, or every week over the summer, every year, there is updates from Falls Creek. Like 600 people were saved tonight at Falls Creek, and I think 600 people started a relationship with Jesus Christ tonight. A meaningful, real relationship. I hope and pray that's true, but I feel like a lot of times that we think that we're just getting something for someday. Does that make sense? Like we're waiting for heaven. And that's even how a lot of preachers talk about it. And there's even an old song we used to sing all the time about Canaan's Fair Banks, or what's the one Leona used to sing? Jordan's Stormy Banks. That's what it was. You'll hear songs like that over and over about heaven being what Canaan describes and what Jerusalem describes. But that's not really what it's talking about. And what we've been talking about for the past couple of weeks is it's the idea of heaven is not simply a place. Heaven is so wonderful because Jesus is there. And if you want to know the truth, if we want to get literal, then whenever he comes back, we're going to be here. A new heaven and a new earth. And I think it'll look a lot like what it does now without sin. And I'm hoping where we can just teleport from one side of the earth to the other without even having to wait. I hope that's the case. But I do know this, though. At the very center of all of it, and the missing piece that is going to pull everything together, is Jesus Christ will be sitting on the throne.
Yeah.
He will be at the center of all of it. He was made for him, by him, and it's coming back to him. But the thing is, whenever we give our hearts to the Lord, or we talk about getting saved, or we want to talk to somebody about what Christ can do for them, it's not about getting them into heaven someday. It's not about getting man out of earth into heaven. It's about getting God out of heaven into man. That abundant life that we talk about, and you'll hear 100 different phrases in the Nazarene church, but like entire sanctification or perfect love, and holiness is the most simple term, but sanctification, and there's several different ways to describe it, but it can all be summed up by looking at Canaan. It's a place where there is peace, and there is joy, and there is self-control in abundance. There's all of these things, there's all the things that you need, all of those spiritual fruits that you need are in Canaan, and they are bigger and better than you can ever possibly imagine. I think they used to talk about the land of milk and honey, but I always think about whenever they went to scope out the land and Joshua came back, you remember they had the grape, it says they were carrying grapes basically on their shoulder. That's how big the grapes were, they were like this big around. When you think of that in spiritual terms, that means that what God wants for you is not to be out starving somewhere, not barely getting by, and not struggling, and he's not just over there waiting beside your mansion so you can be happy someday. He says that right in the middle of this right now, not in the sweet by and by, but in the nasty now and now, that you can know true peace and true rest and be full of joy in such a way. When you listen to Paul write, let's say, the book of Ephesians, or Philippians, either one, if you read either one of those, you'd think he was sitting in heaven when he wrote those, or at least in a church. He was sitting in a prison cell, a dark dungeon when he wrote that. That's what God does for you. And we were talking about calling this week, and about how God calls you to preach or calls you to be a missionary or this and that. And whoever I was talking to, who was it this last week? We were talking to, my neighbor, Matt. He's just thinking about, never mind. No, hang on. Don't say everything out loud. But anyway, we were talking about how do you know when God is leading you to do something new or do something different? And I said, I always used to think that it was common sense, like he was just a human reason, basically. It was the most sensible thing. And he said to me, so whenever when the DS called you and said, I want you to pray about taking the church when you had been married a month and you had no experience or education, that was the most common sense thing you could think of. And I said, no, that's what's odd. that's the dumbest thing I could ever possibly imagine. That's not common sense. Common sense would say, you're not ready for that. But in my heart, not only was I ready, but it was almost as if I was expecting that phone call. Like God had been preparing me for this. I knew it in my heart. That's what God does. When He takes you into Canaan, He will take you to a place where you're no longer worried about what can I do and it be okay with God, or how much can I get away with. It becomes a life of God has filled me so full, and He has given me such a life of abundance in these areas that I find my meaning in what I'm doing. And so that doesn't matter if I'm behind the pulpit or whether I'm doing anything, no matter what my job is, or doesn't matter what my role is, so to speak. As long as I know the Lord is with me and He has given me this life that He promised, then He will carry me all the way to heaven. I buried a lady I guess it was last year now. She wanted to be buried in her sunglasses. And she said she wanted to, whenever she died, she said, put my sunglasses on me, because when Jesus comes back and that eastern sky splits, she said, I don't want to be blinded when I come up out of the grave. But her family talked about, or shared with me how she used to talk about the Lord as if He was right there with her. I mean, that was something, that the glasses thing, that was something that she knew Jesus would really get a kick out of, they said. That was the kind of relationship that they had. That is what, I wouldn't say that I'm there yet, but that's the kind of relationship I want with the Lord. Not just a sanctimonious or just a religious, where you always have the right words or you always have the right voice and you sound, but that you can talk. What did it say Moses? It said, he spoke to him like a friend speaks to a friend. That is the kind of relationship, because God is going to call you to do something. And if you haven't been saved, it's to be saved, it's to give your heart to Jesus. And if you have, He's going to call you to a deeper relationship. He's going to say, I didn't just want you to be saved. You're not saved from hell. That's not what He's saying. The salvation is not in being saved from where you were going. The salvation is being with Christ for eternity. Our salvation is in Him. So He's called you to this deeper life. And sometimes that looks like a call to preach, I think. It looks like a call to missions. It looks like a call to something where God's going to say, I'm going to ask more of you. I'm going to ask that you give me part of you. And usually it's going to be something that you're not comfortable really giving up yet, that you're not sure about. But once you do, God does something incredible. But there's some things, though, and Joshua's going to show you. It's just a very simple outline today, but it's very, very meaningful to me, because I look back and I wish I would have really, really understood these principles when I first started preaching. Because God is constantly preparing you for something. And He's not just going to call you out of nowhere one day and say, oh, okay, I want you to go preach. And you start tomorrow. He is going to begin, whenever I got that call, whenever I knew that God wanted me to preach, and then I knew that I was going to surrender to preach, I look back on my life and I could see that it wasn't out of the blue, but He had been preparing me for the call, and He had been preparing the call for me, and He had been working things out to where there would be that right moment. But if I had known and been much more obedient in the beginning, He could have done it a lot quicker and with a lot less headache, and probably saved my mom a few sleepless nights, honestly. But because if He's calling you to something, there's going to be some other things that He's going to call you to do. He's called you to be victorious. He's called you to live a life of spiritual victory. So if you're going to do that, first of all, that means that's a call to preparation. If you're going to live that life, if you're going to do anything, and I always say preaching because that's my own personal experience, but if you're going to do anything at all that matters for the Lord, you're going to have to prepare for it. It's a call to preparation. It says, Joshua said, go through the camp, God said, and tell the people, get your provisions ready. Do you know what provisions are? It's a word that means food. And the way that it's used here in this context, it means you tell them that tomorrow you're waging war tomorrow, And he says, so tell them to get their food ready. He doesn't say prepare a bridge or prepare a boat or get your weapons or form a military strategy. None of that. He says, okay, Joshua, you're getting ready to fight battle, so you need to get your food ready. Tell your army to get your food ready. What he's saying is this: before you enter into battle, before you face these raging waters, you need proper nourishment. If a preacher or anybody serving the Lord could ever possibly get this, it'll save you so very much. If you try to go into battle not properly nourished, you will get eaten alive. And I was fortunate that I had a family around me in a church that loved me so much. But pastor, you know what the average span of a pastor's tenure is? About 2 to 3 years in a church. And on average, they leave around year 7. They burn out, or they just can't possibly do it, or they get fed up. And so part of it is because they don't properly nourish themselves. You don't take time to be holy. And I know it's crazy to think of a preacher that way, but that is very much true. And it can be true for any of us that are trying to maintain or even grow a relationship with the Lord, to even be a deeper, more meaningful relationship. The devil knows at a certain point that tempting you with ridiculous things is not going to work anymore. And he's going to have to go about it in a more devious way. And what it usually is, I'll tell you right now, this is specific to us, but Little League. He'll put something like that in your lap. And suddenly you realize you didn't prepare for this. You thought this was like a little Saturday get-together thing. And it is not. You got practice 3 times a week and games out of town every other Saturday. And you got one kid in this field and another kid on that field. And you have all these things. And all of a sudden, you realize that you are not having devotions every night. You're basically collapsing. You're falling over in bed and you don't eat dinner as much together. We did after a year of it. We said we are going to have to rethink exactly, if we are going to do it, there's a call to prepare. If you're going to do anything, if you're going to have any kind of relationship with the Lord, you're going to have to properly nourish yourself. I can see this in my own house, and I don't ever want to sound like I'm the most important person there. I'm not even sure they know my name some of the time, but I can tell you this, what I do see. My mood usually generally dictates the mood of the household in general. Not because I'm such great importance, but I think because I'm such a big, whiny baby, basically. I think I just throw a fit and people don't want to put up with it. But I can see that if I had a life of discipline, more discipline than I do, that would dictate it in a positive way. So I did. I started running, I guess it was Wednesday morning. I'd been talking about it for over a month. It was like, I'm going to get back, I'm going to start exercising, I'm going to start out my mornings right. And every night I'd say, well, tomorrow. And I told Laura that Tuesday night, I said, if I don't get up and go in the morning, I just won't go. This is just it. We'll just forget it and I'll just not ever exercise again. So I got up and I went. And I ran Wednesday morning, Thursday morning, and then Friday. It was sprinkling. What are you going to do? Can't run in the rain, so I didn't run. And then guess what? I didn't run Saturday. And then I didn't run this morning. And it is very, very simple to get right back into the same old thing. But if you are really trying to live, that's in like practical things. But if you're going to live a life of discipline, spiritual discipline, and exercise and read the Bible and properly nourish yourself, then you better prepare. You're not going to be in spiritual shape and you're not going to be ready for one bit of what the devil throws at you if you don't really start to live that life of discipline. And I can promise you, I don't know whether it's that way in your house or not, or if you're raising kids at our kids' age, but if you're the leader in your home and you have a disciplined lifestyle, it will begin to positively affect your kids, your family, the household in general. And it never usually has nothing to do with the tasks themselves. I used to always think, well, I need to do more for my wife. That way, because she can't handle all of this. But usually what it is, if I have the right attitude and the right spirit that I ought to have, and I treat and react to my family the way I should, with love and respect and kindness, I find that every single one of them contribute more and want to do more and are happy to help and serve one another. But if I start griping, or if I'm complaining about having to do the laundry that's not mine, or the mess that's cleaned up, or somebody spilled this, I can watch it and it will just absolutely ruin an evening. So there's a call to prepare. If you're going to serve the Lord, you've got to prepare, and you've got to make preparation. He says, get your provisions ready. You need to get in the kitchen and start preparing something from God's Word. It don't start with, like, some people say, well, I want to read 2 chapters in the Old Testament and 2 chapters in the New every day. And I always try to get them to just start with 1. If you've not done it for a long time, if you're going to exercise, I started the first day, ran around the block 1 time. Don't get it all at once. Just start a little bit. The second thing is, there's not only a call to preparation, there's also a call to anticipation. If you're going to serve God, He's going to call you into something deeper. There's some anticipating that you're going to do. He says, go through the camp and tell the people, get their provisions ready. 3 days from now, you're going to cross the Jordan and take possession of the land that I have already given you. Now, we see this over and over again, the significance of the 3 days in the Bible. And I don't know that it meant this back then to them, but it is a beautiful picture right there of what Jesus Christ did for us when He rose from the dead. Because you see, Egypt pictures coming out of a life of sin, of bondage, of being freed. And going into Canaan represents sanctification or holiness or abundance and fullness and completeness. And Romans 5:10 says, for if while we were God's enemies, we were reconciled to Him through the death of His Son, how much more, having been reconciled, shall we be saved through His life? Listen, folks, you are reconciled by the death of Jesus. That reconciled you. You owed a debt, I owed a debt, and when He died, He paid it. That was settled. But you are saved, and you are given new life, and you are given this life of holiness, not because He died, but because He lives. Because He rose again. That's where the life comes from. So what all that simply means is that Jesus died on the cross that He might bring you to God, and so that your sins might be forgiven. But if you're going to be saved, and I'm not talking about just going to heaven, I'm talking about if you're really going to be sanctified and live the life that God has for you, and to live a life where you feel you are in close relationship with the Lord, then it's not the death of Jesus that gives you that power and victory to do that. It's the life of Jesus. We don't come here to mourn a corpse. We don't come here each year to remember someone that we really cared about. We come each Sunday to celebrate His life and to celebrate who He is and that He rose from the dead, that we serve a living God. So we are reconciled by His death, but we're saved. We're saved by His life. Now, folks, this sounds way too simple, and honestly, I don't even preach almost half of that part of that right there, because I wrote this originally probably, I guess Peyton had just been born, I wrote this message first, and since then, I've had a little more experience in life to realize that it's not always as simple as feeling like, well, if I just trust God and if I believe in Him enough, that it's going to open up and all of a sudden I won't struggle anymore and I'll be able to always be spiritual and always be close to the Lord. That is not hardly ever how it works. But I'll tell you what's kind of strange. If I'm looking back on my life, even especially in the past few years, it's always the times whenever I am just absolutely down and have nothing else to give. I've tried everything myself, and I've reached the end of my rope, and I have nothing, and I come to a point when I say, God, I can't do it anymore. I can't. Do whatever. I can't. It's yours. I give it to you because I can't handle it. It's those moments where I am the closest to the Lord that I ever have been in my life. It's the times of deepest struggle. It's the times whenever I'm doing okay on my own and I think I kind of got things figured out. That's whenever I can sense myself starting to distance myself from Him. And it feels good for a short time, but there's an anticipation that comes once you're saved and once you're living that life for the Lord, that He promised me something. He didn't just promise you that you would go to hell. He promised you that you'd have life and have it more abundantly. And so with it, you're anticipating Canaan. The desert's not going to do. So you're going to have to prepare. There's a call to anticipation. Thirdly, there's a call to separation. It says, but to the Reubenites, the Gadites, and half-tribe of Manasseh, Joshua said, remember the command that Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave you after he said, the Lord your God will give you rest by giving you this land. Now, for the sake of time, I'll just tell you what Moses had commanded them. And if you want to read it, it's all about read all about it in Numbers 32. But the Reubenites and Gadites and the half-tribe of Manasseh, they became excited about some property that was on the wrong side of the Jordan. It was on the east side. And they were just absolutely enchanted with this fertile land. And they said to Moses, now Moses, would it be all right if we didn't go all the way into the promised land? Because we found us a good piece of land just on this side of the Jordan. And we'd like to stay right up on the edge. And it borders the promised land. So it's basically the same, but we're just not going to go all the way in. Would that be okay? And you know what Moses said? Moses said, if that's what you want to do, you can do it. But when your brothers go in and they possess the promised land, you're going to have to go in with them and you're going to have to fight with them. And after the battle is over, then you can come back and take that land on this side of the Jordan. And that's precisely what those people did. But he said, first you got to go in here and fight for it, and then you can come back. But they preferred to live on the opposite side of the Jordan. And so here in Joshua chapter 1, Joshua is confirming that choice. This is what they wanted to do, and now God is allowing them, and Joshua's going to allow them to do it. So there's a separation being made for those who desire the promised land and those who do not desire the promised land. You know, it's not that a lot of people don't, or that people just don't know that God wants more for them. A lot of times either they don't care or they just don't, they're scared of what God might ask of them. If I give God everything, if I really turn my life over to Him, He may ask me to do something terrifying, or that I hate, or that I'm not good at. And so, some people will say, I really don't want to go into Canaan. I'd like to get close. But I don't want to go all the way in. And folks, if you want to look at our country today, that people don't talk this way, and they won't even know really how, they're not even going to ever put this language with it. But you have people that are now, more than ever, wanting desperately to follow the ways of Christ, but they do not believe in His story, in the Bible, the biblical narrative. They don't believe in any of it. And so I heard an atheist say, we were watching something the other night, and he said, yeah, I asked my grandma the other day to pray for me. He said, and I'm an atheist. He said, they're tired of the pain in the world and the suffering. So you see this separation constantly. You can see it in the church. You can see it in the world. You can see people that have gone all the way and said, I'm trusting in Jesus. And we don't live this life trying to earn something or because we think it'll make the world a better place. That life flows out of our relationship with Him. So, but there's a call to separation. And sometimes, you know what God will say? He'll say, if wilderness is what you want, you can have it. Give you what you want. If that's what you choose, you can have it. Here's a sad but little spiritual truth. Every person chooses their own spiritual experience. And I don't like that. I don't like that at all, because that means that I'm responsible for it. There's nobody else to blame. And so if every person chooses their own spiritual experience, that means that God's not going to force you into anything. He can't. Because at the core of everything, what drives everything, what drove Him to create, what drove Him to everything that we know, was made out of and was done because of God's self-giving love. Yeah. It's all rooted in love. And love has to involve choice. You cannot create something and you cannot have a relationship with someone that you want to love you unless you also give them a choice to not love you. We had to be able to choose to serve him or to not serve him in order to choose to be able to serve him. So God's not going to force you. The minute God forces you to do anything, then love is taken away. It's no longer love. And not only will God not do that, he can't. It's in his very nature. He could never possibly do it. So he says, if wilderness is what you want, I'm not going to force you to have a relationship with me. You can just wander around. I'll still love you. And I'll still have a life of abundance ready for you. But I can't force you. And so a lot of people will come and they'll hear sermons about Canaan and about victory and about holiness. And in our heart we'll say, well, I don't really want to go into Canaan. I just want to come on Sunday morning. I want to be here for the hour, and I want to pay my dues and pay my tithe, and then I want to go home. And I don't want to be one of those religious fruitcakes. I want to be one of those people. Some will come every time the church doors are open, and they will give their money, their time, but Monday morning they'll be right back in the wilderness. They'll be just right back where they were the Saturday night before they went to bed. And so if you're going to take your possession, if you're going to really settle in Canaan, there has to be a separation between you and the world. And I am just now, after this long, learning exactly what that looks like. Because how do you possibly separate yourself from people that you grew up with, people that you screwed up with, people that you were then separated from, and now people that you feel God wants you to minister to? But where is the place, and how do you balance that and stay separate from the world? And I'm not going to give you a bunch of pointers here because I've not gotten very good at it, other than to say this: don't do it alone. Don't try to go this road alone. And I know you come on Sunday morning, and this is a very important part, but if you're going to live a life separately from the world, the only way that I can find you can go back into the world like that is if you've got somebody next to you. You just take somebody with you, and I think everybody in the world every Christian needs what we used to call accountability partner, basically. Somebody just to call, somebody just to say. I remember whenever I first started preaching, somebody had her mother-in-law, her husband's mom was dying, and he was an atheist and an angry atheist, and she wanted me to come pray with him. So mom was about to pass away, and she wanted me to come pray. And I was so scared to death, and I didn't know what to do, and I didn't know what situation I'd be walking into, so I called Larry McDaniel, and I said, Larry, would you go with me? He said, I'll be right there. And I'm telling you, I was on the verge of, I didn't know if I was going to not go or how I was going to do it, but simply him meeting me there, and when I hung up the phone, I was like, it's going to be fine. That's how you ought to go about it. It always ought to be, don't do it alone. Now, I depend on my wife in my personal life most of the time. Some people, I think, have friends, but we have too many kids. We have friends. I mean, you guys are my friends, but like friends that actually have time to hang out and talk on the phone. And I don't even know where our phone is right now. I'm sure one of the kids has it. But if you're going to take possession of what God has for you, there's not one person that went into Canaan alone. Because the enemies that are out there that the devil has organized and that are against you, they'll devour you in a heartbeat. Some mornings that I come, or Sunday mornings I come in here, and I'm just so thankful I made it in. I say, thank you, Lord. I'm back here with these people. I know I'm safe. I know that they love me. And it's renewing. But if you're going to take possession of your possessions and settle in Canaan, there has to be a separation. Corrie ten Boom said, you need to let go of this world and grab hold of God with both hands. Just say yes. You may not even know in your heart specifically what it is. When God called me to preach, and when I accepted, I didn't know what that meant. I had no clue what it meant, but I just said, God, whatever it is that you'll have me do, I'll do it. That's what you have to do. Because once you're just out there completely trusting on God and nothing else, He'll really start to do something that is amazing. Because then you can't take credit for it. I remember Paula Rose told me one time she was just diagnosed with cancer, and it was terminal, and it wouldn't be long before she passed away. And she said to me, Dane, I couldn't say that Jesus was all I needed until He was all I had.
Amen.
And she said, it brings you to a place, she said, finding out that you're going to die brings you to a place where you are completely and totally dependent upon the Lord in every way. To care for your family, to care for everything. And so I don't want it to take anything like a crisis or losing someone or not saying the things I wish I would have said. I want to get this down now. I want to live the life that God has for me, and I want to possess the life that He has called me to before anything does come up. You know, I don't think God does those things just to punish you or to try to correct you. But I think that if we were ready and we were living the life that He called us to, we would be ready to deal with those things in a better way. I'm going to close by telling you the story of a British naval ship, and I may have shared this before, but it was in the harbor with 5 other ships, and they were all different nations in the South Pacific, and a hurricane was coming. And the news came to those 5 ships. The news came to the 5 ships, so they began to button down the hatches and drop the anchors and put up the ropes and everything you do to prepare for a storm like that that's coming in. And so they all did this except for one. And the captain of the British ship had a different strategy. He said he sailed out of the harbor not to run from the hurricane because there was no way they could do that. They knew it was coming. But he sailed right into the eye of the storm by design. Everyone thought he was crazy, but he said, "Button her down, men. We're going in." How would you like to be on his ship? And so they did. And that ship howled, and it creaked, and it groaned, and it rolled, but somehow it stayed afloat. And the storm passed by, and the captain turned around and sailed back to the harbor, and he saw every one of those other ships had washed up on shore, and there was not a man in sight. Do you know what the first tribes to fall were? Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh. Those folks that said, we don't want to go all the way in. We'll just stay on this side. We're with you, but we're going to stay on this side. That's who fell first. It was them before anybody else. They stayed in what they thought was a safe harbor, and it turned out to be deadly. And folks, I'm telling you that there is a storm that is, I used to always say, there's a storm coming or something big is about to happen. It's here. We're in the midst of it. We're in the thick of it. I've never seen it more clearly in my life. And we must fight. We don't have a choice here. There's no way around it. We can't be silent anymore. We're not given that luxury anymore. The church cannot stay silent. We have to say something. We have to do something. We have to fight. But we have to realize what battle we're fighting, who we're fighting against, and what our weapons are, or we're going to wind up, it becomes nothing more than politics. If it's nothing more than an argument, we've missed what God's powerful, incredible love can do. What it can do is in the middle of a right and left debate of politics where there's passionate arguments taking place, love can just break right on through that. Love can go right past somebody that disagrees with you on everything, and you can be someone's friend because you know they care about you. I care about people. I don't care what their politics are. But if there's any hope for our spiritual, or for our mission, I guess I should say, what we do as a church, it is going to be learning to fight that kind of a battle. Because here's the thing, and I really wish that you guys could be part of this Facebook group. It's the only thing I read online that's a collective opinion of a certain group, really. Because most of it's just, I don't watch cable news anymore. But I hear the way that they're talking about church stuff, religious stuff, issues going on in not just the Nazarene church, but the church in general and in the country. And the way we talk about it, the words we use, and the attitudes we have, and the way that they talk about their fellow brothers and sisters in Christ, it sounds absolutely nothing different than the way the world speaks and the way the world debates and talks. And used to it seemed like the church had a more prophetic voice, where someone could stand up for truth, and stand up for the right things, and fight for things like the Bible, keeping the Bible in school or prayers in school and that sort of thing, for American values, basically. But they weren't doing it just because they wanted the country to be their place. And they weren't doing it by winning an argument. They were doing it because they were people of character and integrity, and they didn't waver from what they believed. But they loved people. They loved people. And if you want to see the most beautiful thing in the world, if you want to read the history of the Nazarene church, and it used to talk about how they would pray the glory down, and how they just, God's incredible power was sweeping over it and started this revival. But it was all rooted in what Nazarene's, our theology is all rooted in this idea that everything is driven by God's love. He wants a life of abundance for you, not because he wants you to do things for him, or not because he just wants the world to be a peaceful place. He wants that because he loves you. He wants you to have the very best life that you can possibly live, and he knows that's with him. And so when we struggle or when we're doing good, no matter what, if we could remember that it's the relationship, proximity, how close are we to God? That's what he's concerned with. That's what we ought to be concerned with. It'll help you see life from a different perspective, and that is easy for me to say because I've never really dealt with any major crisis. I've never had to lose a child. I've never had to witness anything like that. No horrific thing, no tragedy. But I have sat with more people than I could ever possibly tell you. And I have sat in rooms with people and the doctors just told them that they are cured and the cancer is gone and it's never to return. We thank God for that. And I have sat with people where the news wasn't so good. But it has never been the news that has made a difference in the way people react. Never, ever, ever. I've seen people that have been healed who don't care one thing about God and who couldn't care and still think it was an awful ordeal. But I've seen people, the difference is this. The people that are closest to the Lord, they don't care how bad things are. They still know that God loves them. If you look throughout in the 20th century, is probably the best place, like a little snapshot. Look at the Jews. There is no way that their religion or that their faith or our faith would have ever survived some of the awful, terrible things that people have tried to do to snuff it out. But even at the very, very worst, in the very worst possible place, hell on earth, God still reaches down inside of someone and says, I'm here. And not only am I real, but I love you and I want a relationship with you. That's why it survives. And it's carried on now for thousands and thousands of years. And so I'm thankful because that means that despite what I thought, maybe I won't shut this thing down. Maybe it will actually survive me. But I can tell you this, whatever it is you're going through, God will see you through. Yeah. Because he has a life of abundance for you. You've got to get to Canaan. Canaan doesn't mean that you can stop working, but Canaan means you can finally rest. Let's pray together this morning. Sure. Why don't you bow your heads with me? Yeah, and if you feel like coming, let's come down here. I'm going to get this wheel. Hey, I tell you what, if anybody wants to be anointed, just sit on the altar next to Kelly, and the rest of us will gather around. But if you want to, just sit there and I'll come through and then. These moments right here, guys, I can remember time and time again, more times than I can ever count, my grandpa anointing someone with oil and praying or gathering around somebody that we loved and praying for them. And I used to always think it was the more people that ask, then maybe God will do something. But that's not what's happening. What's happening here is God's already been praying for Kelly. Jesus has already been praying to the Father on her behalf. And we're just going to participate in that prayer meeting for a few minutes. And this oil is just simply a way of saying that, Father, we know that not only is Jesus seated at the right hand of the Father, but that His Spirit is here with us, making intercession. So, Father, not only are you speaking to the Father on our behalf, but the Spirit right now is speaking to us on your behalf, and He's reminding us here today that Jesus Christ rose from the dead. And because of that very fact, we can have healing, we can have life, we can have a life abundant, and we will never, ever, ever have to die.
Amen.
Because, Lord, you defeated death, hell, and the grave. So, Father, these things and these struggles, especially things like this when it's physical in nature and we have problems with our health, Lord, it's a very scary, scary thing. Because, God, we don't know exactly what might happen or exactly what you might do. But, Lord, I know one thing, that you have the power and the ability and the love and the care to do it. So I pray, Lord, that you would heal Kelly's leg. But, Lord, that you would also just help her to continue to grow. And, Father, there is not a more incredible testimony than her life. So thank you for that. Thank you for her witness, and thank you for the way that she serves you. And thank you, Lord, for the smiling face. No matter what she's going through, or no matter how hard of a week it's been, you can count on her to always be there, and always be kind, and always be helping other people. So, Father, I pray that you heal her leg and help her, give her strength, Father. And for us as a church family, Father, whether one of us is hurting or one of us is doing good, may we share our burdens together, share our triumphs together, and encourage one another for the journey, Father. Dismiss us now in Jesus' name.
Yeah.